and oh, hang on.
Sorry.
It's all right. Um, I normally ask people how they came across solution focus, what was their journey, and what difference it made. So, how did you first come across this approach?
So I guess I was being trained as a therapist at the time. I was working in the school system. At the time, I was a guidance counselor in the school, which is very much, it's kind of sort of, I guess, what you would call the pastoral team. I was part of the pastoral team in the school at the time. I was actually in elementary education at the time, and then and as I was being trained as a therapist, I kind of transferred into the secondary stream, and I was trained by Dr. Ron Warner in solution focus. So this would have been back in oh my goodness, I don't want to date myself, but I guess it would have been back in '96. It was a long time ago.
Mm.
And Dr. Ron Warner was at University of Toronto, OISE, and I was just blown away. And I guess I was blown away by solution focus because I was working as a guidance counselor in the school system. And we didn't have, while I was also a therapist, we did not have opportunities to really engage for any kind of long period of time or for any extended period of time with students. We really had to work very quickly, and you know how it is, especially when you're dealing with teenagers, you kind of have to catch them at them in the right moment, and they're not always willing and able. So I thought, wow, this is really amazing. So I started learning more and more about solution focus. I started teaching it essentially to guidance counselors throughout the school system, in addition to my day job, which I was a teacher, a guidance counselor, a consultant, and then I became an administrator later in my career in schools. But I was teaching solution focus throughout the board because I thought this is so adaptable to the classroom. This is amazing. We could actually support teachers and educators in how they can communicate with each other, in how they can communicate with students. And I was very excited about it. So I started training guidance counselors. I became a certified solution focused coach, and then I just started training everybody, like anybody who wanted, administrators wanted to know more about it, and I was just going around and doing that. So, you know, my journey in solution focus never stopped.
Mm.
As I evolved as an educator in the school system, I mean, I was also still working as a therapist outside of school part time, counseling students and their families within the school environment, using solution focus. And but I realized that what I was doing most of throughout those years was I was a solution focused educator
Mm.
because I was essentially teaching people in the system how to use solution focused productively in everyday interactions. So when I retired from the school system, I really had the opportunity to do some reflection, to do some more reading. And I realized that as a solution focused educator, what I was teaching mostly, while was teaching the skills and the strategies and the questions and all of that, what I was doing most of was teaching the solution focused assumptions.
Mm.
How do we actually bring ourselves to the relationship? How do we actually bring ourselves to that space of interaction with other people in a non-therapeutic environment, right? Just in everyday interactions. And I realized that, to me, what all of that spoke to was the imagery of what I call now relation spaces. That, to me, relation spaces represents the solution focused assumptions. And it's about how we bring ourselves to these different relationships, which I call spaces. Each one is different. Each one has different characteristics, unique characteristics, Relationships are always evolving, and we have a role and a responsibility in how we bring ourselves to these relationships. So from that, I wrote the book. I wrote the book specifically for parents because um, I, while I had counseled parents a lot and worked in a therapeutic context, I never really taught them the skills the way that I had taught others. And I felt that parents would really benefit from solution focus in the home. So I wrote the book for them, and within the book, and the book is called Relation Spaces: A Solution Focused Handbook for Parents. And within the book, I describe the 6 basic principles of relation spaces, which of course are grounded in the solution focused assumptions. And the book is full of dialogue and case scenarios. And of course, even though it's written for parents, it has a bit of the flavor of the educator in me, because some of the scenarios overlap into the school, and of course there's a lot of personal reflection for parents, and as well as skill building. So some of the nuts and bolts as well. So yeah, and I'm still doing it. That's what I do now in my practice. I go back into schools, school systems. I go into organizations. I work with families, and I continue to teach this wonderful approach.
Mm. Mm. You said it blew you away when you first went. What blew you away by it? What was it? Because I know you were saying a bit about there was some time constraints when working with the people that you. So how did that fit in? What blew you away by it, especially? Because I know what blew me away, and I think we all have different ideas about that.
Well, in schools, we were always so problem focused,
Mm.
right? It was all about identifying the problem. You'd have a child was sent down to you because they had been misbehaving, or because they weren't doing their work, or they weren't going to class, or whatever had happened. And it was always about the problem.
Mm.
How did the fight take place? Why did they go and pull the other student's hair? Why did they get into that, dealing drugs in the school? Why did they go down that road? And it was all about focusing on the problem. And I felt that solution focus sort of liberated me from that. It liberated me from having to know the problem. And it helped me to engage with people, just to learn about people, and to stay open, and not to pass judgment, and just to be able to say, okay, what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about what happened. Tell me about what might be better. Tell me about, suppose that the situation had been different. Suppose the situation had just been the way you wanted it to be. What might have been different? What might change?
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to ask these sorts of questions, the last time, what was, in your mind, when you can reflect on the last time that you could have potentially gotten into a fight, but you didn't get into a fight, what did that look like? What kept you from getting into a fight? How did you manage to get into a fight? I mean, these were questions I had never thought of. I had never thought of relating to people that way. It was always about uncovering the problem and uncovering the problem. And of course, what happens is, of course, we know this. We know that the more we talk about a problem, the more embedded we become in the problem. The problem doesn't go away. And as I said, we really don't have time for that in schools. Right? We have maybe just a few minutes to meet with a student. We don't really have time to get into all of the history of the problem, and we don't need to. It was very liberating for me not to have to know why. And so exciting. The other thing about solution focus that I just loved is that I have always been a very proactive person a very, collaborative and supportive person. It's a big part of my identity. And in learning solution focus, I just felt that I completely aligned. I aligned that somehow solution focus aligned with my type of thinking. And that it was really about bringing out the best in people and talking about best hopes. Just love that, right? I feel that it's very much a part of who I am and how I carry on with my own life. So, yeah.
Wow. It's interesting. I come at us from different angle altogether. I started my working life as a social worker at the beginning of the 70s and came across family therapy when nobody had heard of it in the UK. And from 1970 through to 1986, I guess I was a sort of statutory social worker dealing in child protection, mental health, safeguarding, and I was absolutely passionate about family therapy and how you could adapt it to all these different social worker jobs and to groups and team management, this whole systemic thing. And in the early days of family therapy, it was very non-judgmental. It was like suddenly you didn't have to, your clients didn't have to have pathology. It was, you could treat them as whole people. It was just the sort of what was happening in between. Um, but I taught myself, so I was higgledy-piggledy and all over the place. But and then but I became recognized as a family therapist when it became a qualification as a grandparent. So I never did get trained. And then I got a job as a family therapist, as a proper family therapist. And what I wanted to do was just learn how to do it. Learn how to do it. How to do it properly. And I find it quite hard. I was in a clinic that Mnuchin had spent a year at, so it was full of his ideas. The Milan people had come in, full of their ideas. I'd got really interested in the MRI stuff, so it's all a muddle. And then I was teaching family therapy by then as well. And two things came out at the same time, narrative and solution focus. My two colleagues, Evan and Harvey, and I thought, let's learn these to add them to our family therapy sort of that we could teach. What should we do first? We decided randomly to do solution focus first. So we taught ourselves how to do solution focus and couldn't do anything else afterwards. And so then went on to write a book, and then we met Steve Lachey's after we'd written a book, which was a bit cheeky. And but what I delighted at was being able to do this therapy well. And I just see it as a therapy. I'm afraid I don't see it as a philosophy or as a way of life. I see it as a way of managing a conversation with a client to get somewhere they want to get to, just a way of managing a conversation. And it amazes me how it's spread, what it's spread into. Some years ago, I thought I must get hold of how you transfer this one-to-one conversation into some sort of business approach. I went to the SOL, the Solutions in Organizations conference, back in 2011 or 12 or 13, somewhere like that, and to try and understand what was going on. I couldn't really see how you got from a conversation which means that the client is always the expert to a philosophy which said this is how you do it. Yeah, these are the principles by which you seem to be. And really struggled with it. And so I couldn't really join in the debates very well because I didn't feel I knew enough. And so for 3 days, by then I was quite established as when we'd written several books by then. So I was quite known in the field, but I was so quiet at this conference, nobody knew who I was until the last day. And suddenly the last day, people started to realize who I was. And I was sort of raised on this, on some sort of cloud. But I never, all that came out of it is I thought, well, I'll write something with Mark McCurger, which we did, but it still didn't get me closer. So it's always fascinated me. I even went as far as writing a book with Suzanne Bergstoll, who's a Austrian organizational solution focus. I still have this difficulty of translating a way of having a conversation with a client which leads them to discover what's in themselves and to have no part of that, to have no, to really be neutral about what the client does tomorrow, to switch that into a way of living or a way of being. So it always fascinates me what you do, and lots of people do incredibly creatively, but I've got a missing link somewhere.
I don't think you do at all. I mean, I think so. For me, it was a natural bridge, because when you teach young children or older children, they are in charge of their learning, right? So when you teach that way, it's very similar to a therapeutic relationship. It's not a therapeutic relationship.
No.
It's an educator-learner relationship, right? But the learner is in the driver's seat, right? So if I ask a child what it is that they want to learn today, or what it is that is important for them to focus on in this particular unit that we're working on in geography or in science or whatever, the child, and we allow the child to drive that, that's actually good learning, right? And for the child to be able to say, well, this is what I'm working on, this is what I need help with, this is what I'd like to get better at. The child is driving the learning. So, we talk about the difference between, teacher-directed behavior and student-led behavior. And you're going to have all kinds of teachers that sort of fit within that spectrum. But really, my view is that it's student-led learning, and the teacher is the facilitator. So in that regard, my experience as a therapist and my knowledge of therapy is extremely valuable. And it translates very, very well in that sort of communicative atmosphere. And of course, we can also take that and transplant it into the family. Say, okay, a parent relating with their child, their child is struggling with something. How can the parent help the child, right? Or let's imagine that you have a teenager that's come home exceedingly late on a weeknight, right? School night. And most parents would be pulling their hair out, waiting at the door. My mother would have been waiting at the door, pacing back and forth on the doorstep, not even like outside. My mother would have been pacing back and forth outside, right? Most parents would be pulling out their hair and getting very upset with the young person when they come home. But if we can help parents to say, okay, you know what? Let the child come home, have as good a night's sleep as you can all have after that. And the next day, you can have an informal conversation with your child to say, hey, I noticed that, you came home pretty late last night. It was 2:00 in the morning on a weeknight. And what happened? At which time the teen can share what might have happened. But now they don't need to be on the defensive. They can just share openly because they're being given that opportunity to reflect on what happened without having to be defensive about it. And then it's okay, well, what do you think could have improved in what took place, right? The next time this type of situation happens with your friends, What do you think can be better? How might you manage it differently? Right? That is a very important conversation that can be taking place between child and parent. It's not rocket science, right? It's not difficult for a parent to do that in an informal context, but many parents might not go there.
So if they
might
don't, see, that's giving advice. That's saying to a parent, well, just be quiet about it and do it the next day. That's advice. I can imagine quite a lot of parents would find that very, very, very difficult to follow.
Yeah.
It's what. So how does that? What's solution focused about that advice, or other than here's a possible solution for you to try?
Well, the process, the actual communication that the parent is having with their child is solution focused, right? So that is why I say that I am more of a solution focused educator, right? Because I am teaching the solution focused skills and I am teaching the solution focused assumptions, right? So how can that parent best bring themselves to that relationship? How can they be their best self in that relationship? How can they encourage critical thinking so that their child can come up with their own solutions? Right? That's kind of the spin on it.
Okay. So I can see if you had a parent group that makes a lot of sense. Then teaching these are some ideas come from solution focus that might help you be a parent. It's a one-to-one parent. It would be different.
Yes.
Then we'd be asking them to, in a sense, drawing on their expertise, presumably asking them what they would do.
Well, that would be the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
That would be the therapeutic relationship. Yeah. Yeah. But this is where I make the distinction. So I am not teaching solution focused therapy. I am teaching solution focused communication to everyone that they can engage in on a daily basis with each other. So this is non-therapeutic, right? And that's the essential difference.
Yeah, but presumably again, I'm saying that I could see that would be working where you're teaching a group, writing a book to people. But if you were sitting down one-to-one with a parent whose child was coming in late, would you do the same, or would you have a therapeutic conversation, a solution-focused conversation with them, where you'd ask them what their best hopes are, describe the future they want, how much of it's already happening? Because that's likely to be much more effective.
Yes, I mean, I certainly I engage in a lot of therapeutic conversations and work with families and with parents and in that context, in the therapeutic context. But that's different.
Yeah.
Right. That's different. So, but what I am trying to ultimately encourage people to do, regardless of who it is that they're communicating with in relationship, what I'm trying to encourage them to do is to get involved in reflective relationships and reflective conversations with other people where they themselves don't give advice. Right.
Yeah.
And especially with young people, because young people, as with adults, are most successful when they can ask themselves the difficult questions, when they can answer the difficult questions, when they can express their own individuality and their own authentic selves in a safe context, right? So I'm trying to encourage people to kind of get away from that advice giving, even though as an educator there is advice to be given. Right? Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense to me now, that distinction.
So,
yeah.
Vicky,
Yeah.
Thank you.
being in the school system, we know it can be very why, and punitive. And it sounds like you were looking for the strengths, what students did well, how they managed to do that. how difficult was it to persuade educators that maybe this was a different way that you could go?
Well, the fascinating thing about it is that I started teaching guidance counselors because they were doing the pastoral component with students. And so it made sense. But what happened was that my work with teachers actually came from my work with guidance counselors, because the guidance counselors, in addition to their counseling work with students, they often have to teach a class or two throughout the day. And so they were coming back to me and saying, Vicky, this stuff is amazing in my history class. I've used it in my science class. I've used it in my math class. You should really be teaching to all educators. And I thought, man, you're absolutely right. I should be. And so I was able to take my sample of guidance counselors and the data that I had collected from my work with guidance counselors to share with teachers and educators and support staff so that they could see the value of what we were doing. So it was really a very easy transition. Now, there will be some educators who are not interested in learning about this stuff, right? All they want to know is they just want to teach their subject, right? Actually, elementary school teachers are a little bit more amenable because they usually have one group of students. Well, in Canada anyway, I'm not too sure about in the UK, but they'll have one group of students, they'll have one class that they'll go through the year with, and usually they'll teach most of the subjects to that group of students. And so they develop a different type of relationship. They develop a community relationship, a family relationship with their class. But in high school, it's different. You have to be trained in a specific subject, and then you're teaching to your subject, and it's all about the subject. So you're going to get teachers who will say to you, I'm not interested in all this stuff. I just want to be a good, whatever, social studies teacher. That's what I want to be. And I want to do a good job. And it's the student's responsibility to learn the subject. And that's all I'm interested in. I assess them and I evaluate them. And that's all I'm interested in. But really, that is not what teaching is all about. Teaching is all about, regardless of whether you're a high school teacher or an elementary school teacher, it's about developing a relationship with your students from the very start of the school year. And when you can develop a healthy and safe and inclusive relationship with your students from the start of the school year, they actually learn better. They do learn better. So it's really incumbent upon all teachers and all educators to think about how they're developing relationships, to think about how they're bringing themselves to the relationships with their students, and to build those relationships. Because students who feel safe and included and known, students who feel noticed in those classrooms will learn better. They'll want to go to school. And now, especially post-pandemic, we're having a lot of struggles in schools with school refusal. A lot of students who just don't want to go to school anymore. So, so I yes, there will be some teachers who will give pushback, but I just keep at it, and they do come around, most of them. Yeah.
And it's interesting because what you were saying about the school guidance counselors, as well as working one-to-one with students, were then classroom teachers as well. And in a lot of cases in the UK, if I'm supporting a student one-to-one, I very rarely teach a whole class. So I was wondering what the guidance counselors were doing differently in their classes. What skills were they bringing that was making it, do you know what, this is amazing?
Yeah. So just to give an example, you have a student, let's imagine, who doesn't come to class, or if they come to class, they arrive very late, they come unprepared, they're not getting their work done. And what's happening is that the destructive relationship between the student and the teacher is just ramping up and ramping up. and until the teacher just develops a narrative about the student. Yeah. And the narrative is, you're just a lazy, good for nothing who doesn't respect me and doesn't want to, do anything that I ask them to do. And so they get into this type of cycle. And this is not going to get the relationship anywhere. It's not going to change the student's behavior. It's not going to encourage the student to be more focused or to be more interested in the class. So we sort of put a spin on it to say, okay, let's just take a step back and let's take that narrative that we have of the student and let's put it aside. And instead, let's focus on what's working, right? Let's focus on the student's strengths. Let's focus on the strengths that they bring to the class. So maybe when the student is there, which is not often, but maybe we're noticing things that they do. Like, for example, maybe they're helping a peer, or maybe they're, I don't know, they're able to manage a group. They're showing leadership qualities when we're dividing the students up in groups. Little things that we're noticing. And let's now take what we notice, those positive attributes, and let's actually talk about them with the student. Let's mention them. Let's celebrate them with the student, right? So let's do that instead. So when the student shows up at my door, instead of saying, you're late again, right? It's, hey, welcome. So glad to see you here today, right? So we're not flashing the light on the student. We're not labeling the student. Instead, we're taking whatever little bits, small bits of success that the student has, and we're capitalizing on that, and we're talking about it. And then once we've engaged the student a little bit more, we're welcoming the student. We're answering the student, right? We're not ignoring the student anymore when he does or she does raise their hand because we've got a narrative around them. No, now we are actually saying, hey, I value you. I value that you have a question. I value that you have a comment. I value that just the mere fact that you're here today. I value that. And so what we're finding is that actually completely changes the relationship between the teacher and the student in a very short period of time. Do the same thing with students, where you'll have students who will say, I hate my history teacher. I don't want to go to history class. And it's, well, okay, let's just play along with me. Here's what I want you to do in the next couple of days. I want you to go to class and pretend that you are the best student in that class. I want you to pretend that your teacher really values you, really wants to listen to your questions, really wants your support. Your teacher likes your being there. Your teacher thinks that you're a super learner, et cetera, et cetera. And I want you to pretend that for a couple of days. And then, in a few days, let's meet again and let's talk about what you noticed. And 9 times out of 10, what students say to me is, have you spoken to my teacher? My teacher has completely changed. Yeah, no, I haven't spoken with your teacher, right? And so it's a similar type of scenario, right? They're changing their behavior. They're changing their focus. They're being more proactive. And so because of that, it's changing the dynamic between themselves and their teacher. So that's just one example of how teachers can make changes and how students can make changes. And I also teach to how teachers can do that with each other, because there can be breakdown of relationships between teachers as well. So we talk about that as well.
Chris,
reminds me of
sorry, I was going to say, Chris, you worked in schools as well, didn't you?
I have done, yeah. All my life I've been in and out of schools. But I just before lockdown, in fact, I was running a group in my local school, which I was, here it comes, oops, can you just hang on a sec?
Nope.
Uh-oh.
It It sounds amazing. Because like you're saying, it's almost like we we often spend so much time saying, why did you do that? Do you know what I mean? We've spent so much time on pointing out what's not going well. And sometimes when they do well, it's just like, oh, well done. But highlighting those moments, and the teacher noticing the changes that that student's making is really important, right? Because
Yes.
otherwise you might tend to give up because you think, well, I'm trying to be better. I'm doing what I'm meant to do, but the teacher hasn't really noticed it. How that's really important, isn't it? That side of it.
Well, the amazing thing is how sometimes you'll be speaking to you could be speaking to anybody. You could be speaking to a student or a teacher or a parent, and they'll say the smallest little thing that was mentioned to them about something that they did or accomplished that day. And they'll just mention the smallest little thing. And to them, it means everything, right? Like a parent who will say to me, you know, Johnny woke up this morning and actually gave me eye contact at breakfast or in the kitchen while we were making breakfast or whatever. I actually got eye contact. And that sends a message to me, tells me something. It's made my day, right? Those little successes. A student will say, you know, my teacher, when they were giving an example today, they mentioned me and something I had done last month. They mentioned me. And it makes the student's day, makes the student want to come back, right? It's those little things. Or it's the student who will say to you, you know what? I have been struggling with this math problem all week. But last night, I figured out this small thing. Can I show you? Right? It's not that they're a stellar math student. That's not the point. The point is that they figured something out and they're proud of it.
Yeah.
And they want to show you. And so this idea that it's important for us to be present also when people want to share these things with us. So what is our presence? How are we being present? How are we being intentional about how we are communicating with each other?
Your question, Joe, sort of reminds me of a case where I felt probably, I still think it's one of the most morally dodgy bits of therapy I've ever done. And I still hate to think of it. It was a girl, 16-year-old girl, coming up for the important exams, really challenging behavior. But she was a bright girl and she wanted to get through her exams. She wanted to do well in her exams. And that was important to her with the usual stuff. And she turned her behavior around. There was one teacher that she felt was out to get her. That's what she felt, that this teacher was out to get her. So we then did a session around that and all the sort of things you would do. And she said, I think he's trying to provoke me so I can be excluded before the exams. And I ended up, this is where I think the kind of morality, right? I ended up coaching her on how not to let his abuse destroy her education. I had no access to the school. I'm not based in school, so to go into the school would kind of say this chap is, just there was no way to do that. But that felt an awful thing to do, to help a 16-year-old girl handle an abusive male. that was her view, and if that was her view, that's what she was feeling, then whatever the teacher was intending to do, should have known better than to do that. So it isn't, it is very, not everybody does change. On a lighter note, as I was just going to say earlier, I was running a group for naughty boys, boys with challenging behaviour, and and there's a teacher with me, just as well, because I've got no idea how to control children. And so I was having them write down a list of 10 ways they behaved well that day. And there's this one boy, and they're all sort of at it in little pairs helping each other. And this one lad just couldn't think of anything, And I said, so where are you now? He said, I'm here. And where's here? And at school. Where are you supposed to be today? At school. There you are. There's one thing. You write down. And it was that. And I said, were you at school? Have you been at school any other days? Yeah, I was here yesterday. Well, go on, put that down as well. And I'd been to school three times. And then he started to think, obviously, of other little things. And more to do with things that he hadn't done, like punched somebody. I didn't punch so and so. So anyway, we had this. And his teacher was going around looking at the list, going there. And she saw his. It says, 3's not good enough. You should be here 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And in a way, she's right as well, isn't it? Because teachers do have to, like parents, they have to, there are boundaries, there are things you can do. That might not be in the place to say that, but then she wasn't a solution-focused person. But there we are. It is the teachers. There's the same as for social workers, mental health workers. There's other bits of the job, like boundary keeping, safeguarding, and stuff where you
Yeah.
And there was I saw a young girl today. I think I met her when she was 8. She's now kind of just coming into her GCSEs, Vicky, so about 16.
Okay.
Doing really well in all her subjects apart from religious education. Right, religious education. So she thought she put a lot of effort into this test question. And the teacher said to her, I'm not going to mark it because you probably didn't even get it right. So she gave her a U, which is unclassified. It means you didn't even register on the scale. So this, she told me that I went to another RE teacher, another religious education teacher, and he marked it and said, oh God, yeah, that's a pretty good answer. You're going to get a 4 or a 5 out of this. And she said, well, can you tell my, I said, well, no, I can't tell her. She's head of department. So all I could say to her was, bear in mind that she's not going to be the one marking your exam. If you put that effort in at the end of the day, whatever she thinks, she ain't going to give you that grade. Because sometimes students are faced with that. And what do we say to them? It's because often you kind of think, well, the teacher's the expert, they kind of know, but she felt absolutely, and went out of her way to get another teacher to mark it, who saw a completely different picture. And all I could say was keep putting the effort in because she's not the examiner. The examiner.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Chris, what's that?
So it's a good response.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too that might be a nice opportunity, Joe, to ask her to try that acting as if, to go back to the classroom and to view the situation and that particular teacher differently, and to view her own role in the classroom differently, because it sounds like that teacher is being really harsh and inappropriate as far as I'm concerned. But I would bet that the relationship that they have with each other is a destructive relationship, and that the student is contributing to that as well, because the student doesn't feel liked or respected by the teacher. So the student is for sure responding to that in some type of way, and maybe not communicating as kindly with his or her teacher as they are with you in the relationship that you have. So I think that that would be an opportunity for the student to act as if to go in and act differently based on having a different type of outlook on the teacher and the teacher's relationship with them and the relationship with each other, and see what happens, and to report back to you. Because I think it's hard sometimes, especially for teenagers, to step back and see their role in relationships, right? They're very egocentric. They're very, very full of themselves. And it's all about what this one didn't do right to me, and what that one didn't do right to me, and, you know, how this and that can improve so that my life can be better, right? And so they're not really always fully taking responsibility. In fact, a lot of the times they're not taking responsibility, and they're not really thinking about their role in it. So I think that might be useful for this particular young woman.
I think you're probably, I can see that in lots of cases. I do think we have to be careful about making victims of abuse feel that somehow it's their fault and they need to do something about it. So if a teacher is being, and that is pretty abusive, not to mock something, you wouldn't want to give this child the idea that actually might be something in my relationships that's making her do that, because there's no excuse. There's no excuse for that.
No, absolutely. I mean, that would be I think it's part of a larger picture, right? There needs to be a bigger conversation. And I'm not, and, you know, I've been a school administrator as well. And I will tell you that I have facilitated many conversations of that nature with students and teachers and parents. And there needs to be that angle as well, right? Where the family needs to step in, advocate for their child, have the bigger conversation in the office, and so on and so forth. So yes, you're absolutely right. But I do think that there is a role to play in the student thinking about her communication with the teacher as well.
I get that there's a lot of students that feel that my life is controlled all the time. I have to go here, and that at some point I take responsibility and I make those changes. Because she wasn't being disruptive in this lesson. I don't, like you say, I don't know what the relationship's like. Something somewhere along the line. My heart says, you're an adult, you're a teacher, inspire her. Why are you not marking her paper? This is ridiculous. And her, rather than remonstrating with that teacher or complaining to her parent, she thought, I'm going to ask another teacher to mark the paper. And it was a pass. A 5 is, what is a 5 high school? Because we changed from letters, Vicky, to numbers.
Okay.
I think a 5 is a good C plus or a B.
Yeah, I think it's a B.
Yeah. So in the sense of that particular subject may not have affected her future. She wants to go into early childcare. She wants to do psychology, and so on. So, but I think what it was, rather than her complaining to the teacher about it, she took the initiative to say, just let me ask someone else. Now, whether this other teacher knew what she was doing or not, I don't know, but I thought that's a really clever move. Because now, as a teacher, if I'm an educator and want to inspire people, don't I have to be the bigger person here?
Yes. Yes. And to be fair, I have seen many teachers be reprimanded for behavior like that, and I have reprimanded teachers for behavior like that. So to be fair, right? I mean, if we're talking now, if we're talking in different terms and about how the layers of involvement in those types of situations that can happen in schools. There is a lot that goes on behind the scenes in a situation like that. Yes, so absolutely. But, we're talking about building relationships and communication. Sometimes it's beneficial for the administrator to have a serious conversation with the teacher, and then to bring in, with the students and the parents' consent, to bring in the student with the teacher and to have a type of mediated session where we can really kind of get to the bottom of it and try to help them to move forward. That is ideal. It doesn't always work out like that. But teachers do have to take responsibility for their behavior, and that's inappropriate. What this teacher is doing with this student is inappropriate, and I'm glad that the student is demonstrating some resourcefulness in going to another teacher and saying, "Will you mark my paper?" I would imagine that other teacher is a little conflicted too, though, because now they're essentially marking a paper that they shouldn't really be marking. And I think that if I were the administrator of the school, I would want to know that was taking place. Yeah.
I once had some years ago, I was teaching a whole secondary school, so about 120 teachers, a big school, and it was away from home. I was only there for 2 days, and I was really not well. But if you're working privately, you've got to do it. So I was up to here with drugs just to get by. And just before we started, the person who organised said to me, "Oh, there is one person here who'll walk out inside the first hour, but take no notice. It always walks out." And that's the last thing for me, anyway. It's the last thing I want to hear. You don't want, once you know, or for me, once I know someone like that is in the room, I can't stop looking for them. It drains your energy. I thought, I haven't got any energy to do. And I don't know where this came from, but I stood up and I said, "Good morning, everybody. I need a volunteer. I'd like the most awkward, cantankerous, bad-tempered person in the room to volunteer." And all heads turned. And this bloke at the back goes, "Yeah, that'll be me." So it comes down to the front, and I think, okay, this is a make or break. This question, what are your best hopes from? I would never have dreamed that I won't find an answer, so I won't be able to work with it. So let's just hope we haven't gone one too far. So I say to him, "What are your best hopes out of this meeting, this gathering?" And I'm expecting to say some rubbish. And he says, "I'd like to be able to make contact with my daughter again." This is we haven't spoken for X number of years, and just like to be able to speak to her again. Tears in his eyes. So this man, all these colleagues around. Luckily, I said, "Look, let's imagine you meet, you do. Let's imagine this weekend, a miracle happens, and actually get to meet her. What will you notice about yourself on the way to school?" And we had a description of his next day at school, on a Monday at school, having met his daughter at the weekend. So we get through it, and off he goes. He stays, comes back the next day. Nobody can believe he stayed. Everybody, everybody is loving him now because of his openness. And I've got a follow-up a month later, and the person who's organised it say, for 2 weeks he's been like a different man, been a completely different man. He's such a nice man. We always thought he was probably a nice man underneath, but you just saw, anyway, transformed him. And when he came in, he said, we've been in touch. So it's a long way to go, but we've been in touch. Extraordinary. But not the usual way you'd expect to turn things around in a school.
I feel the need to ask this question. Were you so medicated that you thought that's how the session went, or did
Actually, they called an ambulance and carried me out.
Oh no. Oh, Chris, that sounds amazing, and it's something you would never have thought that he would have come out with.
No, absolutely. It's just
wow.
stunning.
Oh,
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
we only have a few minutes left, so I just want to quickly ask Vicky and then Chris, what is going on with you and this amazing podcast that you and Tara have created?
Oh, that Tara and I are doing.
Yes.
So we decided that we were just going to do this podcast together that's based on relationships. And so we call it A Call Across the Pond, because naturally I'm in Canada, she's in the UK, transforming relationships at school, at home, and beyond. And we just started having chats together on different aspects of relationships, very focused, I would say, in schools and family on the most part. And then we just started interviewing people from sort of different walks of life and their experience with relationship. And it's just been a lovely opportunity that we've been doing. And actually, Aisha, you're coming up next.
I am. I'm next
Yes,
week.
you are.
Yeah.
We're really looking forward to that. And the other thing that Tara and I do, which is a lot of fun, is we have what we call our Relation Spaces Power Bursts. And it's a YouTube channel. If you get a chance, it's basically YouTube at Relation Spaces, all one word. And we try to answer different relationship-based questions in less than 10 minutes.
Oh.
And so in a solution-focused manner. And so we're having a lot of fun with that. And those are short snippets. And so we can cover a lot of ground. So I think we're now up to our 32nd or our 33rd episode of that. So it's a lot of fun. I usually post those on social media as well. So I usually post the podcast on social media when a new one comes out, and the power bursts. But yeah, we're it's just kind of clicking with Tara and me, because Tara is a social worker and she works very much in a therapeutic context in schools, and I come at it a little bit differently. So we sort of just really work well together and look at different sort of angles of the same issue. So lots
Amazing.
of fun.
Yeah, and I love it. I love to hear that therapists, coaches, whatever everyone calls themselves, kind of get together to produce something, because everyone's using their own strengths. And that's amazing.
Yes.
And
yeah,
I won't disclose too much information, but I actually called Chris not that long ago. Oh, there they are. There they are. Chris is found. I called lovely Chris a few months ago in August, and I said, Chris, I need help. I really need help. And we're obviously not going to disclose what it was, because it was something to do with training. Chris, what do I do? Help me. But knowing that you have a bank of people that you can trust and call without judgment to say, I'm actually struggling with this. Like, is it just me? Am I doing wrong? Just put me in the right direction. Say something to me to help me out here.
Yeah.
Is an incredible way of being. And I think we are so lucky that we do have, such a vast, brilliant, amazing people in our community, in the SF community and beyond, where we can just call and poor Chris you were quite poorly, weren't you? You were just recovering from COVID.
You drugged up again?
He was drugged up again. I think we need to have a private conversation about this. The new headline, Chris Iveson drugged up. But yeah, but it was because I went straight to Chris. If anyone's going to be able to help me out with this, it's going to be Chris. It's going to be Chris. And whether he realized it or not, he was so useful. But I want to thank you for that, Chris, because he actually did really helped me to put things into perspective.
Don't pull yourself together then.
I did it. He just said, just shut up and pull yourself together. What are you talking about? Just pull yourself together.
Oh, I would have liked to ask Vicky more about the work with parents, but I think we've run out of time.
We have, but we could. Vicky can come back because Vicky likes us.
Definitely.
It'll be my pleasure. I'll come back anytime.
We know Chris loves us, and we know Vicky
It's a
loves us.
pleasure. It's a pleasure chatting with all of you. It's wonderful.
Very nice to meet you at last as well, Vicky. Very nice.
Nice to meet you too, Chris, and all of you. And I really value the work that you've been doing, that you've done, that you continue to do. I just think that you are adding great value to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Bye then.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you. Take